You know, it's the damnedest thing. So, Tom Hanks is credited with 6 roles in this movie, but one of the roles is as the Scrooge puppet, and I feel like that's cheating. Because in the context of the story, the Scrooge puppet is a toy that's being puppeteered by the hobo character that Tom Hanks also plays. So, yeah, I don't think you can count that as an extra role. I mean, points to Tom Hanks, I guess, for being good at impressions. Hi everyone, I'm Ben, your underground conductor, and welcome to Underground Cinema. This is my official Christmas episode. And I figured what better way to bring in this majestic holiday than to talk about my favorite Christmas movie, The Polar Express. Funny thing, there's actually a couple different milestones with me covering this movie. For one, this is technically the first truly mainstream film that I've reviewed on my channel. And it's also the first animated movie I've ever reviewed on this channel. So talking about this movie should be a fun time. Now, The Polar Express was directed by Robert Zemeckis, who as a director really should be considered a household name. Now, for those of you who don't know, Robert Zemeckis is an incredibly notable filmmaker. Among his most famous works would be the Back to the Future trilogy, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Castaway, and Forrest Gump. But not Poltergeist. Robert Zemeckis did not direct Poltergeist. I cannot stress that enough. Poltergeist was directed by Tobe Hooper, not Robert Zemeckis. And I just feel like I need to put that out there because some people, like this smiling idiot, might think that Poltergeist was directed by Robert Zemeckis. It was not. However, regardless of Poltergeist, Robert Zemeckis is a very talented filmmaker and has made arguably some of the greatest films of all time. Which is why it's really shocking that so many people absolutely despise The Polar Express. Like, people straight up hate this movie. And to be fair, it's pretty obvious why they hate it. Now, before I actually sat down to film this review, I committed a cardinal sin amongst film reviewers. I went and read other people's reviews online. Now, to be fair, I didn't do this to influence my own opinions of the film because I love this movie. I've loved it since I was a kid. But I did it to confirm a suspicion of mine. Based on the dozens of reviews I read for The Polar Express, there's typically 2 reasons why people dislike this movie. Reason number 1 is because Tom Hanks plays too many parts. Which, yeah, I don't care about that. Tom Hanks is an incredibly talented actor, and anyone who paid attention during Back to the Future would know that Robert Zemeckis likes casting a single actor in multiple parts. So, that didn't bother me. But the second reason why people dislike The Polar Express, and this one's really obvious, it's because of the animation style. The Polar Express is a motion capture animated film. It's actually one of the earliest motion capture animated films. The animation style is hyper-realistic, and unlike other animated projects where you have like a specific art style that takes hold, or some sort of distorted caricature that sort of divorces the animation from reality, the intent with The Polar Express is to make it look as close to a real film as possible while still being animated. And that can be very off-putting for a lot of people. I understand that. You know, a very common complaint that people make about this movie is that it's uncanny. And I could see that criticism. For those of you who don't know, the uncanny valley is a very common phenomena where people are sort of off-put by things that look human but aren't quite human. And the more human it looks, the more disgusted you are. Now, the uncanny valley as a human phenomena is actually incredibly interesting, and as it turns out, it actually exists as an evolutionary trait of human beings. Funny enough, I actually learned this from the comedian Whitney Cummings. Apparently, the reason human beings are off-put so much by things that look human but aren't quite human is to protect ourselves from illness. Human beings are sort of evolutionarily trained to spot the subtle movements that exist in other human beings. And if you have something that isn't quite moving right, then that signals to your brain that this thing is probably diseased or deceased. So you should stay away from it to protect yourself from that disease. Now, the uncanny valley as a phenomena has become more and more prevalent as time has gone on and as we've gotten things like deepfakes, but you typically only see this phenomena with, like, live-action movies. Like, for instance, I think probably one of the most infamous examples of the uncanny valley would be, like, in Rogue One, a Star Wars story from 2016 where they resurrected Grand Moff Tarkin. And while the face replacement effect was good, and I think the actor did an amazing impression of Tarkin, it didn't quite look right. But that's a live-action film. Polar Express is a fully animated movie. So with that in mind, I do think the Polar Express does have more leeway with its animation style than a live-action movie. Furthermore, even if you don't like the animation, which is perfectly fine, you're allowed not to like a specific animation style. Like, I don't like the animation style for Star Wars Resistance, that's why I never watched it. But I think The Polar Express has a strong enough narrative and is directed well enough for you to look past the animation. So with that in mind, what happens in The Polar Express? Well, the story is very simple. We open up with our main character, who is actually motion captured by Tom Hanks. He doesn't voice the character, but he does the motion capture. The character does not have a name in the film. He's credited as Hero Boy. But I think that doing that is actually kind of a smart decision, because if you're showing this movie to a kid, and you don't have a distinct name attached to the main character, the kid can really sort of place themselves in the main character's shoes. Because the main character in this film is sort of an older kid who's growing out of the idea of Santa. You can see in this film that he's become very skeptical with things. There's a scene early on where he's looking through, like, newspapers and articles and stuff that all revolve around, like, the idea of how Santa could be the way he is. And you also hear some background dialogue from his sister, who is a named character. The character's name is Sarah. You hear some background dialogue from her saying, oh, he doesn't believe anymore. Yada yada, he said that in order for Santa to deliver all the presents, he'd have to move faster than the speed of light. Which, when I heard that, I just thought to myself, damn, that's some nerd shit. That's like something that Jimmy Neutron would say. And it's actually funny because after I watched this movie, I actually went back and rewatched the original Jimmy Neutron Christmas episode where Jimmy Neutron is actually skeptical about the existence of Santa. And, funny enough, Jimmy Neutron actually never uses the light speed example as a reason for why Santa doesn't exist. In the episode, it's actually oddly personal for him. They do use light speed in the episode to save Christmas, but they don't reference it as a reason for why Santa couldn't be real. I actually have a Jimmy Neutron pin, like, right here. Got a blast! But yes, the main character of the Polar Express is a skeptic. He's sort of losing his belief. And as he's going to sleep on Christmas Eve, he hears rumbling and a train horn. Obviously, he's intrigued by this, so he takes his robe and runs outside. And as he runs, a hole gets ripped in his robe pocket. And, this is very effective foreshadowing for events later in the movie. Anyway, he gets outside, and he sees a huge train stationed outside of his house. He approaches the train, and he sees the conductor, once again played by Tom Hanks. And the conductor says, well, this is the Polar Express. And, we're going to the North Pole, and, you should come with us, because this is a crucial year for you. You didn't write a list to Santa, you didn't take a picture with the department store Santa, and you've been, telling your sister that Santa isn't real, so you should probably come with us. The kid's obviously skeptical because stranger danger, but he eventually decides to run and go on the train. Now, the time that it takes to establish the Hero Boy's skepticism all the way up to him actually boarding the Polar Express, all that happens within a time span of less than 10 minutes. And that's what I really love about this film, the fact that it really does not waste your time. It jumps right into the premise and has very efficient information delivery. There's very few instances of overt exposition in this film. All the information feels more or less organically delivered as the story goes on. And everything you understand about this character is communicated to you immediately, and then you just jump right into the plot. But yeah, the kid hops on the Polar Express, and they're going out to the North Pole. And he sees that there's several other kids on the train, including a young girl who clearly likes him, and a know-it-all kid played by Eddie Deason, who is an absolutely hilarious comedian. Dude's absolutely stellar in everything he's in, whether it be like Grease or War Games. The dude's great. They make one more stop to pick up one more kid. A loner kid named Billy, who kind of looks like Dewey from Malcolm in the Middle, funny enough. Anyway, this kid is also hesitant to get on the train, but he also decides to run after the train the same way Hero Boy did. But he can't catch up with the train, so Hero Boy stops the train. Tom Hanks' conductor character then comes to chew out Hero Boy, and this is just one of many scenes in the movie where you can just see how the conductor is just ready to snap at any moment. Like, the character is just so aggro and so, like, OCD, anal retentive. He's very obsessed with the schedule, and to be fair, it's Christmas Eve, I understand. But, like, he's just such an uptight character, and it's so funny to see how angry he gets. Anyway, the loner kid gets on the train, and then we get the best sequence in the movie, which is where Tom Hanks sings the Hot Chocolate song. I could not stop grinning during this entire sequence. It is amazing. Just them tossing the hot chocolate all over the place. And during the sequence, the hero girl, takes some hot chocolate and hides under her seat to give to the loner kid. She and the conductor give the hot chocolate to the loner kid after the song, but then Hero Boy notices that she left her ticket on the seat. He tries to return it to her, but he ends up losing it. And then the ticket goes on its own little journey and then flies back to the train, which is amazing. But, it doesn't fly back soon enough for the conductor to take the girl away from that train car. Hero Boy's all like, oh no, she's going to get thrown off the train. And then he finds the ticket again. And he's like, okay, I need to get to her. On his way to the front of the train, he runs into the self-proclaimed King of the North Pole, a hobo who is also played by Tom Hanks. And the King of the North Pole is a very interesting character. I've seen this film so many times since I was a kid, and I've never been able to figure out what the hobo character represents. I know that the Polar Express was based on a children's book, so there must be some sort of thematic relevance with this character that I'm just not seeing. But he's very interesting, and as far as I can tell, he sort of represents this idea of, like, skepticism and individualism, sort of personified. He himself is also a loner, and he sees himself as the master of his own Christmas. It's interesting. But he takes a liking to Hero Boy, and decides to help him get to the front of the train. Of course, by the time they get to the front, the hobo just disappears. Hero Boy gets to the front of the train, he sees that Hero Girl is, sort of helping out the engineers, which is fun. But, turns out, there's a herd of caribou in front of the Polar Express, so the train can't move forward. They have to clear it. They manage to clear it by torturing one of the engineers, and they push the train forward. But the accelerator on the train breaks, so they end up going over Glacier Gulch, which, I'll be fair about this, I love the animation in this film. There's so many gorgeous sequences that I think just are absolutely perfect. Like, early on in the film when you see Hero Boy's eye through, like, the crack of a door, it's so gorgeously rendered. Another thing I really love with the animation is that the shading is perfect. Like, shading is incredibly important whenever you animate, like, a 3D model, because it gives the model dimension and makes it feel like it exists in a actual real-world space rather than just on a flat plane. Like, say what you will about this film, it really was groundbreaking in terms of animation. Like, there was nothing like that at the time. There really wasn't. But Glacier Gulch is the only scene in the movie that legitimately looks bad. It looks, people always say, oh my god, the CGI is terrible, it looks like a PS2, PS3 video game. I think that is hyperbolic, but in this scene, and only in this scene when they go through the gulch, that is the only time that statement is accurate, I would say. It does not look good. Fortunately, the scene doesn't last too long. They then have to, get past a frozen lake, which is perilous in itself, and they manage to do it. Eventually, they make it all the way to the North Pole, and the North Pole is absolutely gorgeous. It's one of the best depictions I've ever seen in fiction of the North Pole. It's basically like this big city for elves. But the city itself is empty, because all the elves are just waiting for Santa to go on his departure. And that's something I really love about this film. The fact that Christmas is just treated as, a spectacle. It's an event. And it doesn't matter when you watch this film, if it was when it came out 20 years ago, or if it's now, or if it's 10 years from now. because in the context of the film, Christmas is a spectacle, it feels like it's bigger than it is, which is just fantastic. Anyway, all the kids make it to the North Pole, and then they find out that one of them will receive the first gift of Christmas. They start lining up, but then Billy the loner boy stays on the train. Hero Boy and Hero Girl go to check on him, and, he's all like, oh, Christmas has just never worked out for me. They eventually convince him to get off the train and line up with the other kids, but as soon as they do, the train car that they're in gets detached from the main body of the train, and it just rolls back. They eventually stop at what looks like sort of a train terminal, and they get off, and they, try to make their way back to the bulk of the party, because there's only 5 minutes left to midnight. Hero Girl keeps on saying that she hears bells ringing. Hero Boy doesn't hear it, but she hears it, and so does Billy. So they follow the ringing sound. And Hero Boy not being able to hear the ringing is actually symbolic for his skepticism in this film. He's a doubter. Anyway, Hero Boy, Hero Girl, and Billy end up making their way through Santa's workshop. As they're making their way through Santa's workshop, they come across what looks like a big communication station with a handful of elves who are checking Santa's list. And in this sequence, you see monitors on a bunch of kids. And this is weird because all the kids are live action for some reason. It's the only point in the film where you see live action kids, and I don't know why. The rest of the film is animated. It's very consistent. This is the only sequence where you see live action kids. It's odd. But something I do like in this scene is that the elves are rechecking the list, and they see that there's a last-minute naughty addition because a kid stuck gum in his sister's hair. And, they're debating, should we tell Santa? It's the last minute, it's 5 minutes to midnight, Christmas Eve. And the elf says, cut the kid a break, it's Christmas. But, monitor him next year. I sort of like that. It's a small bit of world building that helps show that, these elves, they aren't just worker drones. They have a bit of autonomy in their own judgment. Anyway, as the elves go to the first gift ceremony, Hero Boy, Hero Girl, and Billy go on a Hyperloop. And this takes them all the way to another warehouse where they pack all the presents into Santa's sack. When they get there, Billy ends up finding a present that's actually his, and he gets super excited and refuses to let it go. Hero Boy and Hero Girl follow him into the sack as it's being closed, and the sack is being flown to the big tree at the center of the North Pole to be loaded onto Santa's sleigh. And something I love visually, they don't even point it out, you just see it, is that the tree is sitting on top of a compass, and all 4 points point south, which I just think is great. That's great attention to detail. Anyway, Billy says that he feels someone grabbing at his leg. And Hero Boy and Hero Girl try to lift him up, and they discover it's the know-it-all kid. It's Eddie Deazen's character. And they're like, oh, what are you doing here? Turns out he was there just looking through his presents. Anyway, as the sack is being hoisted to the sleigh, it ends up knocking over the giant star topper that was on top of the tree. It almost crushes a bunch of elves, but then a bunch of specialty elves get the star and bungee it back up to the top of the tree. These elves are just a well-oiled machine. And anyway, they land the sack into the sleigh, and they pull the kids out, and they're like, oh, we knew you were there. Let's slide you down. It's very fireman style. Anyway, it's now time for the unveiling of Santa. Santa comes out, all the elves cheer. It's just big event. Everyone loves it. And, everyone's trying to get their best view of Santa, but Hero Boy can't see Santa, and he also can't hear the ringing of Santa's sleigh bells. Then a single bell flies off the sleigh, and he manages to get it. And he rings it next to his ear, he still can't hear it. And then, at that point, he's just so frustrated and he's so confused, but he's seen so much at this point. He's seen the Polar Express. He's seen the magic. He's seen the elves and the workshop at this point. At this point, he just says to himself, I believe, I believe, I believe. And then he shakes the bell and he can finally hear the ringing. And in that moment, he looks in the reflection of the bell, he can see Santa behind him. And it's sort of this awestruck moment for him. He was doubting so much about everything that was going on. But in this moment, he has the confirmation that, oh, Santa is real. He spent the whole movie just convinced that he's living in a dream, or no matter what he sees at the end of the Polar Express, it's just not going to prove anything. But he finally has the confirmation at this point. Santa is real. But, then he returns the bell to Santa. Santa looks at all the various kids that have arrived on the Polar Express, and out of all of them, the child he selects to receive the first gift is Hero Boy, the main character. He takes Hero Boy up to the sleigh, has Hero Boy sit on his lap, and he's like, okay, what do you want for Christmas? He whispers into Santa's ear. You don't really hear what he says, but you can make your assumptions. And Santa's like, yes, yes. And, this is sort of just a beautiful scene. Putting aside the fact that Santa is also played by Tom Hanks, Santa is, sort of a deific figure in this film. The moment you see him, he glows. He's just sort of this awe-inspiring figure. And Santa's like, no, that's a good choice. So Santa ends up giving the sleigh bell to the kid. And the kid sticks it in his pocket. And, Santa makes his way on his journey. Delivering presents to all the kids in the world. All the good kids. At this point, the conductor is like, okay, kids, time to take you back home. And as they all board the Polar Express to go back home, the conductor repunches all of their tickets. And he punches them with basically the lesson that they each learned on this journey. And for Hero Boy, the lesson that he learned on this journey was to believe. Anyway, he gets on the train, and the kids are like, okay, show us the bell, show us the bell, show us the bell. Unfortunately, though, he put it in his pocket. He tore his pocket earlier. The bell fell out of his pocket. So, sort of a bitter aftertone here after this grand adventure that this kid's been on. But the kids make their way home. They drop off Billy first, since he was the last to be picked up. And, as the Polar Express is leaving from Billy's house, Billy runs out and he shows, oh, Santa already came and dropped off my present. And all the kids are like, oh, maybe Santa did that for all of us. Next one to get dropped off is Hero Boy, since he was second to last to be picked up. The Hero Girl and Know-It-All say their goodbyes to Hero Boy. The conductor wishes Hero Boy a Merry Christmas. The hobo waves at Hero Boy. Then Hero Boy steps into his house, goes upstairs, and goes to bed. The next morning he wakes up, and it's Christmas morning. And as he's getting ready to head back downstairs, he rips his robe again, tearing the exact same pocket as if the first tear didn't even happen. And this is sort of an abnormal event, because it makes him question, okay, was everything I experienced last night just a dream? So he goes downstairs, he and his sister unwrap their gifts, and his sister finds one gift in the back of the tree. It's a small gift, and it's for Hero Boy. Hero Boy opens the gift, and it's the bell. And there's a note next to the bell saying, oh, you better fix the hole that's in your pocket. This fell on the inside of my sleigh. And, Hero Boy shakes the bell, and he hears the ringing. So is his sister. She hears the ringing. But his parents don't hear the ringing because they don't believe. And, as the film wraps up, Tom Hanks, narrating as the older version of Hero Boy, says that eventually all my friends and family no longer heard the ringing of the bell, but I did, because I still believe. And, I feel like that's just a really wonderful way to end this film. Sort of hammering home the idea that, oh, well, it doesn't matter how old you are, you can still believe in Christmas, you can still believe in Santa. And, when it comes to what he actually asked for Christmas, like I said, he whispers it into Santa's ear, you can't really tell, but if I was going to guess, I would say that he probably wished to always believe. And I think the bell is just meant to be representative of, that idea of belief, which is wonderful. So yeah, I love the Polar Express. Like I said, it's my favorite Christmas film. And there's so many great little things about it. Tom Hanks, for one, kills it in this movie. People always make fun of the fact that he plays, every role, but, he's giving 110% into this film. The dude does not miss a beat. And, like I said, he does the motion capture for the main character, Hero Boy. He doesn't do the voice, but he does the motion capture. But even though he just does the motion capture, the facial expressions that you see on the kid's face, you can tell that Tom Hanks was putting in the effort. I also love the bell as a piece of symbolism. Obviously the sleigh bell is a classic, piece of Christmas symbolism, sleigh bells ring, are you listening, etc., etc. But, a bell also carries a lot of its own, sort of pure symbolism to it. In It's a Wonderful Life, when the little girl says, every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings. There's a sense of purity when it comes to, a bell. And in this film, it's meant to be, a physical representation of, the power of belief. Belief in Christmas. Something else I really enjoy, and this is a smaller detail, but, like I referenced earlier, I feel like crediting Tom Hanks with playing Scrooge is a bit disingenuous since it's the hobo puppeteering Scrooge. But the Scrooge puppet, the model of the puppet, looks a lot like the Scrooge model for Disney's A Christmas Carol, which was also directed by Robert Zemeckis and also motion capture animated by the same company, ImageMovers. It's really funny. It's almost like when Disney went to ImageMovers and had them like make that movie. They were like, "Huh, how do we make Scrooge look? Wait, what was our previous animated Christmas film? Did we have a Scrooge in that? It was a puppet? Can we just do that?" So I just feel like that's sort of like, oh, well, we had Scrooge here, let's put Scrooge here. It's hilarious. It's hilarious. Like, it may not be intentional, but regardless, it's just a hilarious little detail that I just love. And I also find it funny that there's a character in this movie named Billy, and the last movie I reviewed was Black Christmas, and the villain's name was Billy. You know, that's a tenuous link, I know. And Billy is also a relatively common name. But, you know, just funny things here and there. Of course, those are just aesthetic elements of this film. What about the actual substance of it? Well, you know, I feel like you could probably pick apart the world-building mechanics of this film if you really wanted to. Like, you know, for instance, how does the Polar Express work in terms of, like, which kids to pick up? Is it only kids who are skeptical about Santa? Or is it kids who just didn't write a letter? If those things are the qualifier, then wouldn't there be, like, more than a dozen kids on the train? Also, like, what's the age cutoff? Like, there's questions to be asked, but that's not really the point of the film. You know, the point of the film is to sort of reaffirm, you know, individual belief and faith in the spirit of Christmas. And also, like, the main character's whole crisis in this film is the fact that he's skeptical about Santa being real based on the logic gaps that exist within the lore of Santa. So for you to, like, pick apart the lore aspects of this movie, I feel like just sort of goes against the entire point of the film. Not to mention, like, you could pretty much pick apart any movie with Santa, any of them if you wanted to. It doesn't really matter, though, because it's magic. Like, don't get me wrong, world building is important, obviously, and when you have a film with magical mechanics, it's very important to think thoroughly about what you can and cannot do. But I feel like this is the type of film where you sort of just need to settle in and let yourself just run through it. And it's really easy to do that. This film is very well directed and very well paced. Like I said, Robert Zemeckis is very talented filmmaker. Like, the guy knows what he's doing, and he keeps the pace and your attention the entire time. There wasn't a single point in this movie where I asked myself, oh, when is this going to end? When is this going to end? And when we actually got into the third act and things began to wrap up, it went by like that. And by the time we got to the end of the film, I just felt like such a sort of lightness and calm throughout the whole experience. And, you know, part of that is obviously nostalgia. I do love this movie. But part of it is because I do think that this film is emotionally effective. I do think that this film tells a lovely story about a child who is just struggling with holding on to, like, this sense of innocence. Also, Hero Boy as a character is just great. Obviously, his central flaw in this film is the fact that he's a doubter, he's a skeptic. But that doesn't stop him from being a good person. Like when Hero Girl leaves her ticket on her seat, he immediately tries to return it to her. Or when the conductor and Hero Girl are falling off the train, he immediately tugs at them and tries to keep them on. He's a selfless kid who just wants to do the right thing. And that's just lovely. And I think the fact that the animation is realistic actually helps with that emotional investment. You know, like I said, I understand people who are off-put by the uncanny nature of the animation. But I truly feel like the uncanny nature of the animation is diffused by the fact that the film is entirely animated. In fact, throughout the entire movie, I feel like the only element of the animation that breaks the illusion for me, and to be fair, this is a big element, it's the mouth movements of the character models. I don't know what it is, because overall I think the motion framing for the animation models are perfect, which obviously they would be, it's motion capture. But the mouth movements are just off. They're extremely off. And that may be because of the nature of the motion capture, or like how early this film was made. This was 2004, so it was very early use of this technology. It could also be because of redubbing, because with a lot of these motion capture films, you have someone doing the motion capture and then the actual line reads, and then you have another actor come in later to dub over the original lines. But, you know, the lip movements with the characters just don't work for me. It's the only element of the animation that I don't like, really. Other than the mouth movements, though, I really feel like the only substantive critique you can make about this movie is the fact that we don't really receive that much backstory about the characters that we follow. Like, all we really know about Hero Boy is that he's a skeptic. We know virtually nothing about Hero Girl. Billy, the loner kid, he just says that Christmas doesn't work out for him, and we don't really know why. We have all these kids that are on the Polar Express heading to the North Pole because they all have their own individual problems. And while exploring each of their backstories in depth obviously would not be an efficient decision and would overall hurt the pacing of this film, it would have been nice to receive just a couple scenes here and there where characters have conversations about their past Christmas experiences. Just a little something to help with the emotional investment of the child characters. Not too much information, obviously, but just enough for us to understand their motivations and what drives them. Even that Jimmy Neutron episode I referenced earlier, where Jimmy has problems with Christmas, they explain why. It's because he never got the Christmas present that he wanted the most. And, obviously that's a very simple and generic reason for why anyone would have a problem with Christmas. But keep in mind, we're following child characters in this movie. Unless you want to give them the classic Disney dilemma of losing a parent, realistically, the most substantive problem that you would have them face is, oh, well, they didn't get the gift they wanted on Christmas. But still, in spite of all that, I still absolutely adore this film. I know that this probably isn't too substantive of a review or critique, but I don't really see a point in tearing apart a film that brought me joy as a child and continues to bring me joy as an adult. Especially since I do genuinely feel like the story is well executed. I honestly can't make any substantive critiques. Like I said, the film is well paced, it's heartfelt, it's well acted. Even the annoying elements of this film, like the know-it-all kid, who is obviously meant to be a comic relief, they don't overstay their welcome. The know-it-all kid, I think in the film, shows up in a total of 5 scenes. They do not overuse that character at all. And it would have been really easy to in this film. But yeah, I don't want it to feel like I'm just spinning my wheels here and just, praising a film that I know people dislike. I know I'm in the minority on this. But I think that there's a lot to the Polar Express that's really great. Overall, I think Robert Zemeckis just did a spectacular job on this movie. I think that this film deserves to be considered an overall Christmas classic, and I truly hope that one day it receives the appreciation that it deserves. So yeah, that was my review of The Polar Express. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please feel free to subscribe if you're feeling generous. You can also follow me on Instagram or Letterboxd if you want to hear more of my film takes. I hope you all have a happy Christmas, and I will see you all later. Funny thing, I just bought this copy of Forrest Gump today. I was like, I need it for the review. I need it as a visual aid to show that, Robert Zemeckis is a talented filmmaker. I need it.